Gawa Malta bride in the heran in legachtiri malam bishkoleri. This is the island. The small island I've been intending to go to for quite some time. It lies close to the shore in the midwest of Ireland. It's an historic island, a popular tourist destination and a place of pilgrimage, of healing, since time immemorial. Today I'm standing on its shore, but I'm neither a tourist nor a pilgrim. I just need to be here. My urgency overrode my usual careful preparations, and I found myself on the mainland opposite, at the end of the season, with little prospect of getting out here. There were no boats stirring. I hadn't anticipated that. I was disappointed. It had been a longish journey from home, and to allow myself time to research locally and explore at my leisure, I had booked into a guest house for a few days. But all was not lost. People of the West can be very kind and wise, and a fisherman, perceiving my odd anxiety, arranged for his son to take me out to the island in a punt. He didn't mention money, but I insisted. The boat journey was short, and in the sheltered estuary waters, smooth. But for me, landlubber that I am, it was tinglingly adventurous, and with the sea mist slowly clearing and revealing the island, otherworldly. How attuned it all is to the nature of my quest, I thought. The teenager had curtly introduced himself as Sean and been quiet, not at all attempting tourist guide blather. I guessed he was probably a bit resentful at being semi-ordered to bring this solo Irish woman tourist out to the island. Not much of a tip there. The Irish don't tip, I imagined him thinking. I was also probably giving off a vibe of seriousness, of sadness. The young have no patience with sorrow. Nor should they. I too kept my own counsel. Although I teach history, I've long learned the lesson of remaining, when I can, anonymous and listening. "What time do you want me to collect you?" the boy asked, adding dourly, "It'll have to be before 5 or it'll be getting dark." He's trying to cut me short, I thought. But 5 hours, 5 good hours, it might be enough. "Right, Sean, it would be grand if you could come back for me around then." I watched him negotiate the shallows and then veer left towards the distant boat slip, becoming, in a few minutes, just a dark speck at the head of a faint wake, outboard barely audible. The quietness of the island wraps itself around me. It's so good to be alone here, to know I will not be disturbed. What a bonus. It cheers me. I'm greedy for this solitude. I embrace it. It will help me find the spot. I'll start here in the village. The unroofed cottages, huddled against the prevailing Atlantic winds, were abandoned half a century ago. And now there is little or no trace of the lives lived here over the ages. Yesterday, in the local library, I saw a 19th century photograph of the freshly tarred curraghs draped over these shoreside walls, glossy and taut-skinned like dolphins. It's easy to imagine them bobbing on the Atlantic swells, their strong, sinewed crews struggling against the elements in pursuit of their catches. Their equipment and fishing prowess was their salvation during the famine. The population on the island actually grew in those desolate years. But this is not the place I'm looking for. It fails to meet my criteria, such as they are. I'm really, ultimately, trusting to instinct. Patience. I will find it here, I'm certain. I'll recognise it when I see it. To the right of the village, a tall round tower, restored from its splitting by lightning in Victoria's reign, brings me back to the Viking period. I have a chilling sense of terror of the raids as the monks withdrew to what they thought was the safety of the bell tower. So often, though, the towers ended up burning like great Roman candles, the horned warriors later picking through the charred remains for the melted gobbets of precious metals. The silver was then chopped into their hack silver currency. But, to be fair, we Irish historians gave the Norsemen a too simplistic bad press, misled for centuries by selected excerpts from the Christian annals. Today, we know that at least half the carnage at the ecclesiastical sites was committed by Irish on Irish, often bishop upon abbot, monk on monk. My own pirate ancestors from across the river, the O'Crohuir Keeree, were probably enthusiastic participants in the bloody raids on this lucrative commanding island. Before the O'Connor Kerry time, a Viking king of Limerick chose to live here, presumably to keep an eye on the goings and comings of enemies and friends. What's that old saw? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Not quite appropriate. But there, I'm at it again. I'm off on my usual convoluted tangents. They say I have a busy mind. It's so true. The countless tracks of history distract me. I must focus on the task at hand. Time is slipping by. The round tower is also out of the running. Too bloody, too sad. I walk to the top of the only hill on this sandy island. From this vantage point, I can see most of the island. I marvel that there are so many historic sites in such a small place. There are 6 churches listed and a holy well or 2, and we can but imagine what lies beneath, covered over by centuries of upheaval. It powerfully reminds me of the culture, craft, civilization, and destruction that concentrated in strategic places like this. I reflect on how wonderfully tenacious is local folklore. It still, after God knows how long, certainly way before Christianity, inspires people to make the journey to the island, especially on the patron day in March. They come to the old saint sites, doing the rounds, seeking solace, cures, and forgiveness. I research these traditions and revere them. But even if I was still a believer, I've passed the point of seeking a cure for myself or begging forgiveness. I've forgiven myself. And my health condition, it's now way beyond cure. Terminal. There's more to explore. I pass by the imposing ruin of Champelmarv, the Church of the Dead. The name on my map makes me shudder just a little. Too morbid. I should make up my mind soon. But first, a break. I'm a little tired. This is a good picnic spot. I eat the packed lunch from the guest house. I read my notes again. I examine a copy of the 1840s Ordnance Survey map. Yikes! I see details I'd obviously missed before. I've gotten careless. I find I'm sitting on Connacht-on-Angle, the Hill of the Angel. And just across from me is the much eroded ruin of Champel-on-Angle, the Church of the Angels. What glorious names! What intriguing histories and folklore they suggest. Miraculous that they have survived so substantially for so long. Consulting my notes again, I see that this is where the saint was reputedly transported by an angel to do battle with a péist, a monster. The saint's triumph over the dark forces was commemorated with a church. Wonderful. I feel I'm getting closer. I walk over to the champel walls. It has an ancient aura. The massive lower stones, Cyclopean is the correct description, speak of its foundation in Ireland's Golden Age. I have little doubt that underneath the stones is the original wooden structure of the first Christian settlement here. It's a pet theory of mine that almost all the first churches were built of wood. I slowly circle the building. And then, although I hardly need further confirmation, it jumps out at me. A sign is carved on a low coin on the outside wall of the building. Even after all this time, it seems freshly cut into the stone. It comprises a horizontal bar about 4 inches long with a stylized arrow pointing up to its centre. It is so right. Although some might say it was just an ordnance survey symbol. Hallelujah. My quest is over. I had a son. I can imagine coming here with him when he might have been 5 or 6 years old and spinning a story of lost treasure. For all boys love stories of buried treasure, don't they? I would have tried to stimulate a love and wonder of history in my child. And I would have playfully told him that we would return someday to this place and search for the buried treasure. When I was pregnant with him, I was brimful with life and hope and love. Like many parents, we wanted everything to be special for our baby. But my yearning for the right name was probably a little over the top. My husband, wary of my stubborn will, mostly left it to me as I exasperatedly threw out all the usual suspects. And then I discovered that the townland in which I was born in my own inland county was originally named after a 6th century saint, a saint who for 1,000 years had been locally forgotten. We had grown up with the anglicised version of the name and a spurious interpretation of its origins. How appropriate, I thought. I have a fine Irish saint's name for my child, which, although rooted in my area, has been neglected. Explaining its origins on the hoof will always lead to talking up and revising history. My very life's raison d'être. I chose a fine, noble name for him, but he never got to recognise it. My baby died. A cot death. That's what it was called then. An accident. But I killed him. After breastfeeding one night, exhausted, I fell asleep. I rolled over on his tiny body. The psychotherapist said it was not uncommon, a terrible accident. Fingers not too subtly pointed. So you slept with the baby in your bed and not in a cot? Had you been drinking? I fell apart. Everything fell apart. We divorced. I lost myself into my work. Years passed. I became ill. I had all the tests and treatments, but now, finally, I'm under sentence. Senan was my baby's name. And here, where I am now, is Inishcaig, Scattery Island off the south coast of Clare, the holy island of the mighty and miracle-performing Saint Senan. Senan was the one foretold by the too busy St. Patrick. Patrick, looking across the estuary of the great river from the south, and perhaps skirting the invitation to come across and preach himself, predicted that Senan would gloriously lead his kinsmen into the Christian era. He subsequently became so famous that the River Shannon was called after him. So the story goes. Back beneath the inscribed coin, I reach into my rucksack and take out a small urn. I shake the ashes out onto the grass. I fulfilled my mission. I spend most of the rest of the day sitting in the unseasonably warm sunshine. My thoughts linger on the impermanence of our volatile world, our temporary home. My own grief of a decade ago comes back to me. It had seemed so terrible then as to be insurmountable. I dwell on this sorrow, but also reflect on the potential peace offered by acceptance and the passage of time. I actually am not too certain of my overall sanity, but today, at least, my busy head is comforted by the dense history and archaeology of this ancient place. And of course, I'm soothed by my own dogged sentimentality. I feel I've travelled intimately today with spirits of the past, linking and interlacing their histories with mine. I'm content, too, that my son's remains lie here. I needed this history-rich setting for him. I've been accused of being too obsessive with history, letting it rule my life and relationships. Maybe that is so. But it is as it is. I smile again, this time remembering, with some embarrassment, my own early innocence, naming my son after a notoriously misogynistic cleric. Can you believe? It was said that not even Senan's sister in death was allowed on the island. The poor creature was buried below the high tide mark. My feminist colleagues would really have had a field day with that one. I didn't know about this quirk of Senan's character at first, and I didn't stress it too much later either. In any case, I have an alibi of sorts. Giggling, I wrote it down yesterday at the local library. Thomas Moore, poet and lyricist, suggests Senan may not have had a totally iron resolve to resist a woman. O Father, send not hence my bark through wintry winds and billows dark. I come with humble heart to share thy morn and evening prayer. Nor mind the feet, O holy saint, the brightness of thy sod to taint. The lady's prayer Senanus spurned, the winds blew fresh, the bark returned. But legends hint that had the maid till morning's light delayed, and given the saint one rosy smile, she ne'er had left his lonely isle. The distant coughing of the outboard heralds the coming of Sean, dusk, and the close of the day. It's time to go. Heading back towards Kilrush, the ruins on Inishkahig are silhouetted like tree stumps after a forest fire against the crimson sunset. Sean, again, has little to say, for which, again, I'm quite grateful. He does, however, look at me a little strangely. Could he be wondering why I'm looking different? Calm, contented. Stepping out of the boat at the town, I give the youngster a decent tip. He stares at the note, surprised, and mumbles, "I hope you had a nice time, Miss O'Connor." Wow, formal politeness. "Sure, you could ask for me again if you want to come this way and in the quiet times like. But mind, ask for Senan was what I was baptised with. I hate the effing name, and sure everyone around here is called Senan. And anyway, my mother says he hated the women, and my girl doesn't like me named after him. She calls me Sean." I smiled. I almost laughed. I love it. History lives. I will try to come again, before my health fails completely. And I will, of course, ask for Senan. And in the end, the very end, my sisters will bring my ashes here with instructions to scatter them around Champel and Angle. I hope they'll make a day of it, take their children with them, and have a picnic. Obsessive to the end, I'll leave this map for them, together with my notes about the saint, his island, and my musings. You never know. They might inspire one of the children to take up history. but at the very least, they will serve lightly, I hope, as our slightly eccentric epitaphs. Lachran galna lainach, silche fagna tira, Kjærner ei rachteren, kjærner manne mine. Tigan gira din dov,